think book clubs are a wonderful invention, and it's a great community tool for people who enjoy literature. But more importantly, I think in the context of Goa, very few people either read Goan literature. To many, it comes as a surprise that there actually is a category called Goan literature. And so for Goan people or people who live in Goa to actually engage with material from Goa is extremely important. And a book club is a wonderful community way to do this. And I'm so pleased to see that despite the pandemic, this group is still using technology to come together as a community around the written word, right? So before we start with, there's a few ground rules I was asked to share with you. Thanks to Rajutha for sharing those with me. So I will say a few words of introduction about Dr. Viegas as well as the book. And then we'll have each of the members introduce themselves very briefly so that we keep the community spirit going. And then Dr. Viegas will tell us about her experience of writing this book in a few minutes. And then subsequently, each member will have the opportunity to share their thoughts on the book very briefly. I apologize in advance if I cut you off. It's not personal and it's not meant to be rude. It's just to keep the conversation going so that everyone has a chance to share their opinion and so that we keep the discussion flowing. And then we'll have a discussion itself. The moderators are, so I ask that you mute yourself until you speak. Just so that there's no sound interruption, and also so that everyone is aware this session is being recorded. Rahul is coordinating the recording on his end with the goal of hosting this video on YouTube so that others can benefit from this discussion. And I think that about covers all of the logistical details. Yes, and then we'll finish with some concluding statements. So that's pretty much the order that we'll use. So to start with, I'll just say about myself very quickly. My name is Benedito Ferrao, or Bene for short. I'm a professor at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, and I teach a variety of courses, but one of the first courses that I taught and continue to teach is the literature and literary afterlife of Portuguese India. And I'm very pleased to see that we are discussing Savia's book here today. In addition to Savia's work, I've also taught Damodar Mauzo's short stories and other writing by him. My students really have enjoyed discussing Goan literature about Portuguese India. And I've had the opportunity to teach Savia's book twice now, and both times it was extremely well received. So it's going to be really interesting to discuss this book with a different audience in Goa itself. So a little bit about Savia. Dr. Savia Viegas, of course, the author of Let Me Tell You About Quinta, which we are discussing today, in addition to being a writer, is also an artist and an art historian. She received a PhD in 2000 from the University of Bombay, where her dissertation focused on Satavahana sculpture. Dr. Viegas's research earned her a prestigious Senior Research Fulbright Fellowship in 2003, which placed her in residency at George Washington University and the Smithsonian Museum, both in Washington, D.C. In addition to creating college courses in heritage management, Dr. Viegas has also been a college lecturer at Kishan Chand Chalaram College, as well as an instructor at Shashti Kids School, which she founded in Carmona. Her other academic pursuits include an ongoing biographical project on Goan artist Angelo de Fonseca, which has been supported by the Indian Foundation of Arts, and a study of Goan photography titled The Family Archive, which is being conducted under the aegis of the Government of India's Ministry of Culture. While she continues to research these areas of Goan art history, Dr. Viegas has actively written on these and other topics in various publications like Himal South Asia and a special issue of Marg, which she also edited. Further, as a public intellectual, Dr. Viegas has shared her findings in curated exhibitions that have showcased de Fonseca's canvases, and the sepia-tinted photography of Goa's early 20th century. As an artist, Dr. Viegas has displayed her own paintings in solo and group exhibitions in Goa, India, and other parts of the world. Dr. Viegas's paintings have additionally found their way into her own fictional worlds in such books as Tales from the Attic, Abanama, Adi and Didi, a graphic novel titled Song Sung Blue, which is her most recent publication. And of course, if you hadn't noticed, some of them also appear in Let Me Tell You About Quinta. So with that, I'll pass it on to Savia herself to introduce herself, and then she can pass it on to whoever she'd like to next.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be discussing the book. It's almost 10 years now since it became a public artifact and was published by Penguin. But it has continued to have a shelf life and has touched many hearts and many hands and, caught many eyeballs. So thank you very much for taking this book on. It's a book that is very close to my heart because it was a book that suffused me quite a lot when I was going through a very difficult period that was introducing a new course at the university. Very often there were some chapters that were read by students. So in that sense, while it is a book that was published by Penguin, before that it had a life of its own. The book actually deals with 100 years in the life of a family set in Carmona. There are lots of close encounters between the book and my own identity as a person who has been brought up in and lived in Carmona for a long time. And this kind of incestuous overlapping was very much deliberate in order to create a kind of auto novel and at the same time make it into a work of fiction. I think that's all I'd like to say about the book. We'll have more to come by in the discussions. Now, I request everyone to introduce themselves because I think that will create greater intimacy in the group. Thank you, Benny, for being there. And thank you, Rahul, for all the support that you have given. And you beautiful members of the book club who have taken so much interest in the book.
So Savia, if you just kick it off to someone else and then they could do that to someone else, they'll move it along, actually. So whoever you'd like to have introduce themselves next.
Okay, Olinda, I don't know who's there. Okay, let's start with Bai. Would that be fine? Let's start with Bai. Can you hear me? Shall we start with Bai? Shall we start with Bai? Hello?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, everybody?
I can.
We can hear you, Bhai. Carry on, carry on.
Yeah. So, I'm very happy to be here and very nice to see so many writers and readers attending this session. Savia, I must congratulate you again on this book because the opportunity that you gave us to read the book again. Unfortunately, I could not complete it for the second time just because the print is very small. I have
That's right.
problems with my eyes. So anyway, I will say a few words. Before that, I will just let you know that you all know today is my birthday. I don't celebrate it because last year we was celebrated on the last day. I wanted to speak it. But then, as you know, yesterday my book was launched. So when Savia gave the idea that this session should be held on the 31st, I said, can you shift it? Because 31st was, I was planning my book launch on the 31st. And she chose first. In fact, I had advised my publisher to change the date because first is my birthday. But I did not want to appear like an obstacle, so I wanted to go with Savia's. So here I am. But
Thank you. Thank you.
let me apologize because again today there should have been a night curfew, so we had asked my children to come in the afternoon, so I had enough time to be with you. But then they all have come. I have guests outside, so after some time I'll take your leave. So my apologies,
Sure.
please. So that's one thing. Coming to the book, Savia, I love the book like anything. As a writer, I find it very difficult sometimes to deal with the topics which are autobiographical. But you have done a beautiful job of it. Okay, you can guess it is autobiographical because we know you are from Karmara, because I know you well, I can guess that this is really autobiographical. But then description is so, so good. I really envy you, Savia, for the way you go for detailing. Because any episode you take and you have penned it so well that entire episode comes before you you see it before your eyes. So the visual effect you get when you read the book. The characterization is so perfect. I don't know why it's a demandist term. Have you used it somewhere? The term demandist, which was very often used during the pre-liberation period. Demandist that goes to now to go to courts for litigations. So when I read about kerosene, I felt I missed the mandist here. But then I like the way you describe the characters and also describe the locations. Rarely you find I find some similarities in Tivolem, but this looks more authentic because of the way you describe them. So I won't take longer because I get calls from outside. So if you don't mind, I would have to ask for your leave. Don't mind, Savia.
Yes, have a good day. Yeah.
Sure. I would have loved to be here, listen to others, and I'll break for some time, but then I'll take the leave. Yeah. Is around you can, sorry, and I'll be happy to go through it again when you upload it on the video. Okay, Rahul.
Yeah, yes, bhai. Thank you. One quick thing, one quick message for everyone. A bit of a surprise really from Zoom. They said that they're going to not give us unlimited time at a go. So what will happen? Don't worry, it'll break. But you kindly use that blue hyperlink and rejoin. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We'll have to we'll just lose a bit of a connection. Okay, but just rejoin again on the same link. Yeah. Benny is gone somewhere. Yeah. I'll just tell Benny. Benny, I told everyone that there will be a break, but that they have to just rejoin with the same link. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Are we doing that right now?
Yeah, we finished with Bhai now, and I think somebody else needs to speak. So
I'm just going to nominate someone else so that we move along. Mr. Norbert Diaz, please. You're on mute, Mr. Diaz.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. Yeah, a bit louder.
I'm Norbert. I'm actually from a financial background, but I did my graduation in English literature. So I have love for literature. For a long time, I haven't been pursuing this interest, but of late, I'm catching up. I'm very happy to be here. very happy to get a chance to read Savia's book. I especially like the book because it deals with Goa. Very often we read foreign authors and we are more enamored by foreign authors. But this gave me a chance to read something that was very much Goan. And I was also surprised initially at the introduction to Savia, because I haven't met Savia before. I don't know her personally, but I have met her or rather seen her for film screenings. And I was pleasantly surprised with the numerous accolades and qualifications and background that she has. So I was very happy to read the book. This book, I felt I could identify with on many levels. One, as a villager from a village very close to Carmona. Two, as a person who I feel has almost lived through most of the period of the book. Thirdly, it deals with concerns that are very much my own concerns about Goa, the environment, which I share. So this is a book that has touched me at many levels, apart from the literary and academic excellence of the book. I also, however, I found the book a bit depressing. Throughout, it looks like the landlord families seem to be having a lot of bad luck and a lot of negative things happening to us. Also, I felt that somewhere along the way, too much of, not criticism, but too much of what you could say, too much of evil has happened to the landlord families. Whereas if you look at Goan history and culture, a lot of landlord families have also done extremely well. Their children have prospered extremely well and have contributed a lot to Goa, which I feel could have been mentioned somewhere or the other. All in all, as I said, it's an excellent book. Savia, it was a pleasure to read your book. And I may say that I have become one of your fans, and definitely I'm going to pick up the rest of your books. Thank you.
Thank you, Norbert. If we could pass it on to Mr. Stanley Coutinho, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Am I heard? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm Stanley Coutinho. I have a totally different background. I come from commerce and law and government service and all that. So literature has always been an area of flirtation rather than any real direct connection. So the flirtation, is much more interesting than the real relationship. But I found that I have done. Over the years, I've been reading books and then went into book reviews. I think I've crossed over 1,000 books by now, of reviewing in various magazines and newspapers. And I'm in the process of writing a book on poems and probably a novel which should come out in the next 100 years. I don't know when. So that will be, and I think a collection of short stories also, which is coming around shortly, hopefully. So that's with me. As far as Savia's book is concerned, I don't know whether we were supposed to comment on that in the very beginning, but I had read it in somewhere in 2009-10. Ages, it looks like ages now. But for me, it was the first introduction to Goan way of life as such, because I was brought up in Bombay. And for me, it was something really revealing, that the transition period from the rule of the landlords to their total loss of power, loss of position altogether. It was something very personal also, but then let's not get into that. So that was a beautiful the experience for me to read. So I would say it was...
Stanley, sorry to interrupt. We are almost out of time. So just so that you know, we're going to actually get cut off. But as Rahul says, we should come back in.
Yeah, okay. We'll have to come back. We'll wait till it closes.
No, Stanley, you can continue. till we break off. Don't worry. And then everyone needs to come back from the same link.
Yeah. Okay. And I was just saying that it was a different kind of experience for me to read the book, and I enjoyed it those days. I couldn't read it today because I just got the information about today's meeting yesterday evening. So
Yeah. Okay. It says Percy Cardozo. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Hi. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Percy. Basically, my name is also not. It's not Percy. It's a shortened form. My actual name is Paciencia, and at some point it got shortened because in some places where I worked, outside Goa, it was a mouthful. So people found it easier to call me Percy, and then it has got stuck on. So I'm a psychologist by training. I am not really, into literature, but I'm an avid reader. And I am very much interested in literature. Basically, I pursued literature till about the second year of college, and then I, fell in love with psychology and gave up, pursuing literature. But I did not give up reading. And so when I had a very brief stint in school teaching up to higher secondary, and kind of got into teaching a little bit of English language, and then I lost track of reading because it was career and raising a child and stuff like that, and it has been and then it has been chasing a career. So it has been very recently that I was fortunate to get in touch with Savia through Roxana and found this group, and I'm really happy to be on this group, to be interacting with such brilliant people who are, such a nice group to be with. And basically, my reading has, growing up in the kind of late 70s, 80s, I have, grown up reading. So basically, I have grown up in the post-liberated Goa, and so I've grown up reading on English literature like Shakespeare's abridged versions and Charles Dickens and stuff like that. And Goan literature was something that I was never kind of introduced to in the school, except of course in our Konkani language class we used to read Sir Mauzo's poems and Narayan Desai, and there was this literature that I was introduced to, but not so much English literature, Goan English literature. And I must say, I must thank Savia. By some chance, I happened to be in some, one book reading long ago. I recall that must be at least 10 years ago, when my son was just born, and I just needed to, get some respite from childcare. So I met Mr. Rodriguez, took me to some, library, to the Goenkaranso Dais, that library, and Savia happened to, there was this book reading, and then I went in looking for Savia's books, and this was the book that I, picked up, and that's when I fell in love with literature, and since then I have been, reading whatever I could get my whole hands on, and I went digging into Goa's past, and it is quite interesting. Thanks to Savia for introducing me to Goan literature. That's about myself. Thank you.
Next we'll have, could we have Miss Astri Ghosh, please?
Oh, Astri's there.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me to this meeting. I've enjoyed reading your book, Savia, and as well as reading Bhai Mauzo's literature as well. So this double event with his launch yesterday and your discussion today, it's nice to attend. I unfortunately, my literature background is that I'm a literary translator and I've written. I used to be a journalist, so, but I've translated a lot of different literature. The last things that I have worked on are translating the plays of Henrik Ibsen to Hindi. So I also write poetry and have written short stories after I moved to Goa, about Goa, but I haven't, developed them enough to publish yet. But they're underway, so we'll see. I have used the lockdown to, in the beginning there was this, I couldn't be creative. There was this feeling of sitting at home and not being able to do the kind of stuff that usually comes very easy to me. So I finally joined a course in Portuguese and studied very intensely for a month, intensively. And I had an exam yesterday, so I don't feel capable of saying something very deep about your book right now, but it was a pleasure to read it. I read it a while ago, and I've also have read the book that came, your last book as well, and it was a pleasure. And I will just, property and disputes, and they're the stuff books are made of. So I will just participate by listening to what others are saying today, if that's all right.
Thank you, Astri. Next, Ms. Glenys Mendonça, please.
ഈ ബുക്കിനെ പറ്റിയോ? യുഎസിലെ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിലെ പ്രൊഫസറാ, വിർജീനിയ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി.
Can you hear me?
Philip, I think your mic is not muted, and Suresh. Glenys, carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. Hello.
Yes. Folks, just assume that you can be heard. Just go on and speak, and if we can't hear you, we'll let you know. Speak, please.
Okay, I'm Glenys Mendonça. I am an assistant professor in Carmel College for Women, and I teach literature to undergrads at Nube. And I've been a part of this book club, but I was not active because I live in Panjim, and I couldn't attend the physical meetings in Margao. But I've been a friend to Savia, and I've been reading a lot, especially during the lockdown. And this book is something that I read a long time ago, and it's part of my, you can say, literary interests. Besides reading and teaching literature, I've also been translating a lot of Devanagari Konkani fiction into English. I've done a couple of short stories, and I have also recently written a book during this entire year, which I've just submitted, and it's on Alfred Rose, the great singer of Goa. So I've just submitted it, and it will be soon published in a couple of months from now. So that's me, Dr. Glenys Mendonça.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. Next on to Miss Olinda Fernandes, please.
Oh. Hello everyone. My name is Olinda. Hello, Bene. Hi, Savia, Rahul, everybody here. My name is Olinda. I was born in Goa. I studied in Goa. I did my graduation in Margao, and I did my post-graduation in Panjim. I'm basically an accounting and finance student, and did my post-graduation in business administration. And I'm a late entrant in literature. Why I say late entrant is when I left Goa when I was 24 years old and just returned last year. I took up to reading when I was like late 30s, when I had very, very complex situation at the workplace. and the business world, and I just couldn't make sense of many things. But the books took me to places where I could not find answers. I sort of found answers in the novels, in characters, and in people from different parts of the world. We were working with around 200 nationalities there. So it sort of gave me a lot of, I cannot say escapism, but a lot of knowledge about things what I did not understand when I was young. This is the first book I have read on Goan literature, thanks to Savia. She encouraged me to read it, and I just finished it today. And it was a very intimate story for me personally, because everything what she said there, I could just reconnect and understand and try to look at this age of my life, to look at it in a very different angle. I'm not able to talk about it philosophically today, but the first reading just got me connected with every single thing what she wrote about the landscapes, about the people, about all our traditions. We had a recent discussion just 2 days ago, and I sort of mentioned about the things like how would somebody else take this book? People who are not of Goan origin, people of different cultures. I'm very much interested to know from Bene how others have taken up the contents of this book, because it relates to me very personally in terms of my growing up, in terms of issues of property and houses and litigations and traditions, and everything over there was so much connected with my own childhood. But I'm very much interested to know what the rest of our panel here has to say. That's it. Thank you, Bene.
Thanks very much. Of course, my pleasure. Next, Rajita, please. She is here? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
We can't see.
I don't know something.
That's okay.
Okay, but you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm Miss Rajita Borkar. I am an associate professor at Chokle College, and I teach a couple of subjects there. Other than that, I also take up these heritage walks with a company called Soul Traveling. Okay. And I'm interested in a lot of things. I'm sorry, this thing is, yeah. So reading has always been a part of my life, and I have lived in Goa almost my entire life, so I've always looked forward to reading. So reading has always been a part of my life. Literature that showcases Goa. Savia's book has kind of, I mean, in school taught very, I don't know, but it's very probably studying in ICC school, but we didn't have a lot of literature that did with Go. So when I started reading books that had a
not coming clear here. Out of this dough, it doesn't work. But first put it, the day they put it, it worked in the whole house. And then it stopped. 2 days, exactly 2 days. Then it stopped. But here in this.
Speaking right now.
Okay, I'm going to mute and fast.
Carry on, Rajita, please.
No, I think I think we are coming back to the book.
We can't hear you, Rajita. Your mic's muted.
So reading literature that showcases Goa. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Mic in the bro.
Now it's working here. It's working. But it was not working even before. When it came, I was talking on the phone, but when I reached outside here, it stopped. When I came to open the door, it stopped.
Rahul,
in my bed.
Yeah, there's another voice.
Sometimes in the kitchen. Because those are the two places I occupy the most.
Rahul, are you able to mute everyone?
because of that.
Yeah, no, I'm no, Bene, I'm not able to. I can mute everyone individually, not all together. I can mute.
That's why I answered it.
Because
I'll
Because
do
of that,
that.
I answered it. Even the normal phone doesn't work. If I
there we go. Okay, and then Rajita, if you could unmute yourself now. There we go. Okay, carry on, please.
Yes. I think just since talking about the book, Penny. Can you hear me?
Your sound's distorted and the video is stalling.
Okay.
I think there might be a
I'm
connection.
asking whether just okay, I want to move on to somebody else and I'll come back. Just leave
Sounds
me
good.
and I'll join again. Yeah?
That's
Yeah,
good.
that sounds
Okay.
better.
Can we move on to Mr. Suresh Babu, please? No? Okay. Ms. Siona Gomes, please. Also not present.
Hello.
Oh, no, she's there. Okay, carry
Hello,
on.
good evening.
Hi.
Yeah. I'm a medical doctor, not a literary kind. I'm a fairly new entrant to this book club culture, thanks to Savia for starting the book club in Margao, because we never had any such things happening in Margao. So that was one thing that was felt we need to have one in Margao. And I was very happy and lucky to join that. And from then on, I'm sort of now reading books. But really, Savia, I must thank her, because I would not have known that she had such a talent in writing this book. It it went from generations to the next, from the present to the from the past to the present day, how Goa is moving out. So, I mean, she has managed to capture everything in that, and it's so very detailed. It's so very descriptive, and the all the activities at the village level, really I could relate to each and every one. The fishing, the harvesting, I mean, everything was in it. So it was a very interesting read. There's not a dull moment. And I think that's all from me. You can continue with the next person.
Thank you so much. We'll try for Suresh Babu again. Not here. Okay, on to Vishwesh Kandolkar, please.
Oh, sure.
Also not present. Okay.
Hi. Hi. So yeah, this is Vanessa here.
Hi, Vanessa.
Yeah. So I think my video, I'm not able to. Okay, figured it out. Hi, hi everybody. Yes, I'm Vanessa Tissa, a friend of Savia and a big fan of her work, as well as a friend of Bene's. And I think I'm here today to discuss about the book. And of course, this is a fantastic story. And I think what I think is that it's a very close reading of Goan life, its issues and, Goan landscape and the landlords, the story of the landlords. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book and I thought it makes a very good read. Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to this meeting, yes.
Thanks. Then we've got Preeti Araujo. I don't know if they're here. Preeti or Suresh? No, maybe they're.
No, I'm Preeti. I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Myself though. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Preeti.
Yes, please speak.
Okay. Yes, can you see me?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Savia.
Hi.
I must really. Hi. Okay, I'm Preeti Araujo. I'm actually a doctor by profession, and I actually am an avid reader. And I've always wanted to join this club just to instigate me to continue to read, because you know how we get caught up in our medical world and we don't get time to read.
But just the second time I'm attending the book club, and this book has really intrigued me. I took a lot of trouble to get that book. 10 people had booked the book, and then suddenly I got that message from Leonard that 4 books were still available, and I went and picked up one, and the same day I picked it up, he messaged back in the group that I had taken someone else's book. So he told me, read it quickly, and there was a lockdown for 3 days, so he said, come out someone will come and pick up the book once it's out. But nobody picked up the book, and I managed to have the book with me. Anyway, Savia, the book was really, really good. It was quite nostalgic for me. I brought back so many things of my childhood. Of course, I didn't grow up in Goa, but we've always connected with Goa because we used to come every year for holidays. And all the things about how the landlord has really, I mean, the landlords were the Bhatkas, and they were the Munkars, and there was such a big, there was such a big change. I mean, they were put on pedestals, and the Munkars were absolutely, they were like, not exactly slaves, but they were really low down compared to the Bhatkas. And what you said in the book is so true, everybody is equal, and you have really depicted a life of, right from, in 100 years, exactly what has happened. As one of the gentlemen, I think Norbert said, you should have said that some of the landlords' children did do well, and some of them did bring up Goan culture, but not everyone. And you can't touch everything in one book. But what you've done in this book is really amazing, and I really hats off to you for bringing all those little things. The life of Goa, how they used to fish, they used to go harvesting, and all those ladais you even quoted in Portuguese, and the words that you use, the Konkani words, the Portuguese words. It was really, really good, and you've done a fantastic job. I congratulate you. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks so much. It's great to meet everyone. Let's carry on to Savia. I think you would like to share a few words about the activities of the book club, and then perhaps we could just go directly into if you'd like to say any any more words about the book itself, and then we'll carry on into discussion. How about that?
Okay. Very briefly, thank you, Benny. Very briefly, I'll talk about the Margao Book Club, which was started about 1 year and a month ago, roughly. We are a year old. And it was started on the occasion of the reading of Song Sung Blue, launch and reading of Song Sung Blue. And everybody expressed the need to start a book club. And that was the first book that we took on hand. And after that, we have done several readings of old classics, well-known write-ups, as well as modern books. One of the books that really was well discussed was 100 Years of Solitude, Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, then Sita's Story. Then we had discussed 1984 and Animal Farm, and there were very intense discussions. It brought together a group of people who had always felt the need for a common shared space where books that they read could be discussed. And we were just wondering why we hadn't connected earlier, because every one of our book club members are here because we love books and are intense readers. And it's such a pleasure being part of this group, because everyone comes having read the book intensely, and the discussions are intense and, well rounded up. We've had some problems after March 15th because we've not been able to clearly discuss books because of the pandemic. So about 3 months ago, we said, why don't we go online? It was a decision that many of us were not very comfortable with, because if you're a book reader and a book lover and a writer, you have this intense connection with paper, with written words, and with physical meetings. So we were not very comfortable that we come into a shared space on Siberia and just discuss a book. But clearly there was no other option, because if we did not reconnect, then the group which had built up a momentum over 7-8 months would have lost that grip. So we came together at the suggestion of some of our members to discuss Annie Zaidi's love stories. And that went on very well, because Annie herself was present on the discussion, which added new luster to the meeting, because you don't normally have writers coming to your physical meetings. After that, we discussed M and the Big Home by Jerry Pinto. Jerry also, in his inimicable, way, brought new energy to our group. And then we wanted to take on another book, but some members suggested that why don't we look at, let me tell you about Quinta. And I'm very happy for that discussion, humbled that I could have had 2 of my books presented, but we are happy that till this lockdown continues, we want to be online and want to continue reading books and talking about them. Maybe, Benny, I will talk about the book after everyone has got a chance, because enough has been written on the book. Let people express their views. That would be much better.
Sounds good. Okay. So yeah, let's launch into discussion. I thought what I would do is ask questions as they strike me. Again, apologies in advance if I cut you off. Like I said, it's not personal, it's just so that we are able to get everyone in on the discussion. If you notice at the bottom of your screen where it says reactions, if you hover above that or click on it, it'll give you 2 icons, which are either thumbs up or a pair of hands clapping. If you use either one of those, it'll indicate that you'd like to speak, and I'll call on you. And then assume that you can be heard once you unmute. If we can't hear you, we'll just say that we can't hear you, okay? So the first question I thought I would start with is, clearly the title of the book is Let Me Tell You About Quinta, which suggests that someone has to tell us about this house, because a house cannot speak for itself, right? So at the very start, we have this opening moment where we don't know who the 2 parties are that are talking, but they are talking about Quinta. Now, if you think back on your reading of the book, you'll recall that most of the action doesn't actually occur in Quinta. Most of the action occurs around Quinta. And yet, even though Quinta is not central to the book in the sense that a lot of the action doesn't unfold in Quinta itself, we are always reminded of its presence. One of the things that we're told is that one can see it gleaming on the banks of, the side of the water. One sees it when they enter the village. All of the discussions in the book, be they legal, be they, associations of family, right, are around the house, right? The book is in many ways a cultural history, as many of you have said, of about the last 100 years of the going past. But when we think of why this book centers around a house, which in many ways is absent from the narrative, but is very much a part of it in how everyone refers to it, I'd like us to think about why it is that a house occupies so much of what we discuss in this text and what is discussed in the text itself. So thoughts about the Quinta and its double absence as well as invisible presence. Rajitha, please. I feel a little bit like a teacher.
That never stops. It just carries everywhere that you go. Once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher. Yeah. I think the identity of the house, that's how I look at it. The identity of the house, everything is central around it, The mother, Tito's mother, she kind of protects the house with such zeal and makes sure that, nobody enters it. The same kind of possessiveness comes into Tito. California tries to take the house. So it's like the whole idea is that how do you identify yourself, or you have a place to call home. So finally, it's there where everything is centered around. So even though the house, like you said, the action is not taking place in the house, all the things that are happening around it are kind of affecting the house, and therefore the others' identities and their livelihoods or their mental peace or whatever, or their distress. Everything is connected to the house in some way. So you say that uski jaan usme atki hai, their whole soul is in that house. So it just kind of carries over, and that's what Preciosa. I'm sorry, I don't know the pronunciations very well, Savia, but
Preciosa.
okay, Preciosa. So even I thought it was Quinta for some reason. I don't know, it was Quinta. Okay, so it's a softer, yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to say Precio, right? So she also doesn't like the fact, like Tito, when he realizes that California is, destroying the house, she wants to find the gold, and then he gets so angry about it, his health, gets affected. She knows she's done something wrong, and to a point where President finally decides not to pass on the house to her legal heirs, and rather gives it to somebody who respects the house. So it's like the center, like anybody would be possessive about their home. So I think I'm rambling, but anyone would be possessive about their homes, and that's how. Let me tell you about Quinta becomes the central theme. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But at the same time as the house is the presence, it's visibly crumbling, right? So it's on the one hand a symbol of feudal power in Goa, right? So it's part of that Munkar Badkar system, but it's crumbling, right? And what's interesting is that the only way the house can last is because of the labor of the Munkars, and this becomes quite a sticking point in the narrative, right? So even as we think of the presence of the house, one of the things that we have to be aware of, I don't know how many of you have seen this movie about, it's called Adama de Chandor. It's a Portuguese documentary about this grand old house, which is the Menezes Braganza house in Chandor, right? And one of the things that we realize in this documentary is that the documentary cast the house as being something that has always been there, it will always be there, and if it doesn't exist, then Goan history itself seems to exist. But that house wouldn't exist without the labor of the Munkars, right? So let's think about that as well. The symbolization of the house as power, but then its ruination as an indication of something else. Does anyone want to jump in on that? And apologies, folks, it looks like we are again running out of time, so once we get kicked off, please log back in. Okay. Percy, please.
So yes, going from what Rujuta has said, for me, I think the house, though it is not present in every chapter there, or it's not kind of intentionally, it's not the central focal point, but I feel the house represents an identity for in the Goan cultural context. You don't have a house, you don't have an identity, and so your whole life centers around looking after that house, maintaining it. And I know those good old days, people used to spend all their energy in maintaining those houses, and everything was centering around that house. So possibly that is one reason why the house, the book is titled, let me tell you about the Quinta. Basically, it's kind of, one kind of a protagonist, not a personified kind of an entity, which is, reminds everybody that this is the identity of Goan families. That's my thinking. I'm not maybe,
No, absolutely. So we can't think of Quinta without thinking about Mariquinha, right? And one of the things that the novel does is it's really big on fleshing out these very strong female characters, and the strongest of them and the most determined, right, is obviously Mariquinha, right? I want to apologize in advance to anyone who didn't arrive at the sort of like hidden, crazy ending where we discover what Mariquinha did to her husband, right? What's that about? What does that indicate to us? So if you recall, there's a discovery in the silted fields of a vat, and in the vat there's the doctor's implements, and we reconnect that. Quetzalcoatl gets really, really ill when he connects the dots of his family's history and the discovery of these materials. What's that about? Rajitha?
Yeah. Okay. I had not realized, Savia, that the mother is responsible for the death of the father. Is that okay? That, I mean, because Benny just said it, I just clicked like a light bulb, which I had not made sense of. Okay. In which case, I would have thought that it was.
It's hinted at. We don't know. It's hinted at, right?
I thought it was the doctor who does something. Who plays foul. That's what I thought. But if it is the mother, then her character is extremely strong, where she knows what she wants, and she's not she does not stop to get what she wants. So she realizes that the husband is away in South Africa and that he's not going to be around, and she's looking after her happiness. And like you said, Bene, very nicely, that all the female characters, they don't have to be like out there and in your face kind of, but they make sure that things are done, and they are done the way that they want it to happen. So I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce the names. So the mother is the mother is the strongest character, who very not many will find. Like throughout the book, she has been cursed and she's holding on to the power, and she makes sure that she keeps everybody in their place, and she throws Tito out of the house for trying to poison her, and all these things. So strong women throughout the book. And then the last thing, if that is if that is what it was, then that is the final thing, where she has taken care of what she wants and she's leading the life that she wants, is my take on it. I don't know.
Anyone else on that point about Mariquinha? It's also striking that in the book, we're told that the villagers describe her as being the one who wears pants, the one who wears trousers, right? So that even our understanding of women in their strength can only be expressed in patriarchal terms. We don't even have the language to say of women that they are strong, because they're women, right? And it's interesting, if we think that she's the one who, in cahoots with the doctor, kills her husband. In a sense, I read that as a kind of killing off of patriarchy itself, right? And that her son is he's interesting, and I want us to maybe pivot a little bit to, as we continue thinking about Quinta and we think about Mariquinha, to also think about her son, right? So Quetzalcoatl. Now, while we were introducing ourselves to one another, there were a few folks who commented on the nature of the Badkar-Munkar system, where it seems to suggest, the book seems to suggest that there's obviously this divide, and I think Norbert was saying that maybe there isn't a representation of quote unquote the good things that the Badkars did. But think of the damage the Badkar system does to someone like Quetzalcoatl, who clearly doesn't want to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, right? So that the Badkar system not only affects the Munkars, it also affects the Badkars, because what's expected of Quetzalcoatl? So let's think about that. Maybe we could think about Quetzalcoatl himself. Is he your typical Badkar, or what's different about him? And we're going to get kicked off brief in a couple of seconds. Anyone?
Basically, I felt, so the court cases and things like that, I felt, he did behave like a typical landlord of those days, at least the days that I have known. I'm not really sure what was those, pre-liberation days like, you know, though I did hear a little bit here and there from my parents and grandparents. I was too young to understand those nuances. But from a few these, you know, observations, I felt that he did behave like a typical Bhatkar of those times. At the same time, he was not like the tyrannical ones that were described, you know, to me in those stories that my grandmom and my mom often told us. So, you know, it's quite difficult to understand whether he was a typical one or not the typical one. But I guess he also underwent a lot of, you know, a kind of, you know, emotional turmoil himself, you know, to look after that house, to save the house, and to fight that battle.
Absolutely. I mean, how many of you have seen the film Parasite, the Korean film that won the Oscars this year? Right. So in the film, there's this underclass of people, these working class people who wind up working for this really rich family. And one of the first things that they say is that the rich family are really nice. And the mother of the poorer family says the reason they're nice, the reason they can be nice is because they're rich, right? And one of the things that we see with Querosito is that he's clearly not as strong-willed as Mariquinha is. And even though he's not given the same, he's not allowed to do the things that he wants to do. He eventually leaves. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So he eventually leaves to pursue bus driving, which is not a proper profession for a landlord, right? But in some sense, even though he pursues, you know, this kind of untraditional profession, he has a fallback. If all else fails, he still has the feudal system to fall back on, where he doesn't have to do work if he doesn't want to, right? But then let's think of characters for whom that's not a choice, right? And an obvious foil, I thought, for Mariquinha is Piedad, right? What are your thoughts on Piedad? So if you recall, she's the posque who gets adopted by the family, and she has a very difficult life, disappears from the text for a little bit. She's got 2 children. The parentage of the children is in question, but ultimately it's her son Robbie who inherits the house. So in a sense, the house winds up with, if not a Munkar, then a Munkar adjacent character, right? So thoughts about Piedad as a kind of foil to Mariquinha, and the difference in class status and her relationship with the family. If I was actually teaching, this is the moment at which I would just call on random people. First, we've got Norbert, followed by Rahul, please. Norbert, your mic's muted. We can't hear you. Go ahead, Norbert. Yeah.
I think Savia makes a very bold statement here. To many, it would seem almost scandalous, because most people would rather sell their homes or just let it rot rather than give it away to somebody who would be considered as below or not up to the family mark. So I think Savia is making a big statement there. I found it hard to believe, really, and perhaps she has something deeper to say there. Maybe she wants to say that the future of Goa is in the hands of a whole different section of people. Maybe. I think Savia would have to clarify that, but this is the way I look at it.
Rahul, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, hi. You know, the character of Piedad, I found that very interesting because you know, I had before I read Savia's Quinta book, I had read Wendell Rodriguez's Posque, you know, And so having read Wendel's book and then followed it up soon after by Savia's book, it gave you a lovely connection of this whole Bhatkar and Munkar relationship, and especially the whole concept of the poske. And I found the way Savia brought out, I mean, as she has done with all the characters, really, she's really fleshed them out, and she's really worked on her, on the characters. Each character is really speaking to you, and you can really understand where they're coming from. But in Piyadat's case, I found it very interesting that she has this relationship with Raymond, and and then he tragically dies, and then how this Baman comes into her life, and the whole character of Baman himself, because the how colorful he is, because his days as a sailor, and the escapade from that white shark and all of that, and then how this whole what I found very interesting about Piyadat is that she is really running that kitchen and the home, and I found her character to be very strong, because it's not easy being a poske and getting not getting the respect due to a person, but at the same time she is strong enough to assert herself and have a relationship with Baman, and and the children, and then how interesting that Robbie comes in, gives that wedding invitation and all of that. I like that whole. Very, very well done. Thank
you. Rajita, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, and Piyadat's character finally, like what, I'll just go off on what Rahul said. So to live in a house and not be respected and constantly be berated or looked upon as down, even though she's the one who is responsible for the house running smoothly to a point where the internal functions at least, and then still having doing whatever needs to be done. So she knows at whatever level, that having an affair with Raymond is not really will not really be looked upon, or she will not get the respect, or she will not be given the same status as someone who would have probably married him from the same stature of society, etc. But she still continues because she knows what is going to happen, who is going to look after her, and is she even going to get married. So they formulate and concoct this whole thing about a husband who was there and then he's gone and then he comes back, and then she's making sure that what she wants to do is happening, to a point where she even keeps her daughter in the orphanage and her son in Fatorda with the I don't know, Santa Claus, or what's his name. So she keeps him there, knowing that, or never even thinking on, that doesn't stop her from pursuing what she wants to do. So even we are not sure whether she's the one who has, with the help of Baman, probably helped break into the house and finally kill the mother and gotten away with that. But like you pointed out, Bene, all strong women throughout the novel. So she's also in a different way very strong, where she is taking care of her own needs and she knows what she wants and she does not care about society. So she's very vocal also about the fact that, she says, if Raymond was here, if Baba was here, he would not have made me pay. He would have taken care of me. So it could have like a double, not a double meaning, but like it's a hidden meaning there. Anybody could kind of decipher from that what she means, and it would come across for a third person like her talking about him in that way, whether it's a little iffy kind of, but she doesn't care. She just wants to, like, she's happy with not happy, but she knows what she's doing and she's making the best out of her circumstances and not compromising wherever, I mean, in any way possible. And I would just like to since Norbert had raised that point when he was speaking, he said that whether her giving the house finally to Robbie is the Goan's heritage going into foreign hands or outside hands. But at one point, the daughter, Marie, she says that, in her, in that stupor or whatever, she says that finally blood is blood. And so they all are aware of the fact that Robbie and Sarojini are finally Raymond's children. So even though they might come up and act, and try to put up a picture in front of society, she does what she knows that, instead of California coming in and robbing the house and not having any emotional connection to it, Robbie's whole attitude to the house is that he's so grateful. And he says, in the beginning also, when, all the chapters, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, the beginning has everything, like he's talking about something and he's talking about a little bit about the house. Let me tell you about Quinta, he says. And then he says, the old lady has died and I have to, will you ever care about the house like I care, and things like that. So it shows that he's so, all he wants from life, or he has not even realized that Raymond is his father, but he is, all he wants from life is, to buy a small plot of land and to work hard and to be able to get that. So for him to be able to be given this fortune or these 2 properties is like an absolute dream come true. So finally, in a poetic justice sort of way, it just stay in the family. It's just that it's not like a direct thing. Is what I think. Yeah.
This is a very common theme, I think, in Goan literature. So I think down the road you're going to be reading Skin by Margaret Mascarenhas, and you'll see that there's an echoing there as well of, these families that have secret members of the family that aren't actually acknowledged, right? And in the case of Quinta, we know for a fact that Sarojini is Ramon and Piedad's daughter. The parentage of Robbie is a little bit more complicated than that, right? And this is where the elements of magical realism in the book are so interesting and rich, right? We've got the floating coffin, we've got the coconut water bursting forth from Piedad's womb, right, which we should talk about. And then we've got this really symbolic and physical presence of the fetus in fetu, where Robbie carries his twin with him, right? And we should think about, really what is the relationship while Ramon is still alive? What is his relationship with Piedad? At one point, in talking about the history of Goan multiculturalism, he goes from discussing the diversity of Goa's history and its food, which is part African, which is part European, which is part South Asian, to then saying about Piedad, and here's the living embodiment of all of that mixture, right? And she's not allowed to speak for herself. He's the one who represents her. Right, and then when she produces the offspring who ultimately gets to live in the house, it's interesting that on the one hand she has a relationship with Ramon, who's a Bamon, but then also has a relationship with a Bamon who's not a Bamon, right? So there's that kind of weird sort of thing that happens there, and then we discover that when Robbie has the operation and they do the DNA testing, that the twin and him are actually from 2 different fathers. So we don't actually know which one is which, right? So that at the end of the novel, the composite person who occupies the house is possibly from the bloodline of Mariquinha and her family, but may also not be. But in that multiplicity and diversity represents the coming together of different strands of Goan identity, right? So I agree with Norbert that in some sense it might seem like, why would someone give the house to this person who in many ways doesn't seem to belong to it? But in the very way that Quinta is a presence in the house and is really, like I think Percy was saying, is a protagonist, is a character that's always there even when it's not there, is it a metaphor for Goan identity, where to have a house is to have identity, right? Think of the multiple ways in which the book represents those who don't have a house. Tish Shamel walks around and keeps on breaking the houses of the Munkars, because the moment they put down a foundation, it means they have a claim on the land, right? So I want to juxtapose this physical appearance of a house, be it Quinta, be it the Munkars trying to build a little house to protect themselves, versus someone like Robbie, who may or may not be of the progeny of that house, finally coming to occupy the house. Because if not him, then who? So let me ask that question. If not Robbie, who should the house go to? Perhaps we could have someone who's not chimed in yet. Glenys, Olinda, Siona, Vanessa, Suresh, Stanley, Astrid. Olinda, please. Olinda? We can't, you're unmuted. You're muted. Okay, great. Carry on, Olinda.
So your question is whom the house should go to?
If not Robbie, then who? Yeah.
But at that point of history, or at the point where we are in the storyline, there's nobody around other than, I mean, the grandchildren are away. The daughter has committed suicide. By the way, the suicide is like Virginia Woolf's suicide. So I was thinking about it too, who it should go to. So my question is back to you, Ben. Actually, I have lots of questions to you, because since Savia told me that you have taught this book in wherever you're working, and I really had a lot of questions, but maybe this is not the panel to ask all those, because this is my first reading. First of all, I have this question about this house as an identity. And we want to preserve that. The way we are evolving now, do we want to keep that house as an identity? Is that the question Savia is posing to us? I want to know what are the challenging questions she's asking for audience. I would like to know from my colleagues here on the panel, is she asking us some very, very serious questions in terms of our culture here? Or is this something which is similar to other societies as well? Can I ask this to anyone else here? Is house so important? And the house in terms of stately houses, why are they so important? Why are they there in any way? Why is Quinta there anyway? Why it has to be preserved anyway? So who's going to answer these questions? Is Savia asking us to think about it?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if Savia wants to respond now. I think that's a great question, and in many ways, I think you're asking it rhetorically.
Yes,
because,
yes.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the other things that we notice is the great deal of resentment by those who once had power, right? Mainly because of ownership of land. When people go abroad, when the Munkars go abroad and they come back and seem to show off their wealth, right? They're looked down upon for embracing a culture that is they're constantly told, this is not the way Goa used to be, this is not the way you should be behaving. And yeah, it's a great question. Should the house be allowed to continue? And if so, in whose custodianship should it be? Right. Yes. I don't know if Savia wants to comment now or
later maybe.
Or if Olinda herself wants to answer that question, because I don't think that question was being asked without an answer in mind. And Percy would like to chime in as well.
Yeah.
Percy, please.
Yeah, can I comment? So, please. Oh, is Savia responding?
No, please, I will respond after you, Percy.
So, I'm not responding as such. You know, my thoughts were, when I was reading the book, I didn't get into, you know, analyzing the power dynamics and things like that. I just enjoyed it because it captured a lot of nuances of, you know, the social fabric of Goan society, the Goan community. And I felt, you know, it just made me feel nostalgic. And these are very nice questions. And Olinda is, and Benny is really taking us, you know, really getting us through a literature class. I remembered my, you know, second year literature teacher asking us this question. So I didn't think, you know, think in that sense. And maybe I should go back and read it third time now to, you know, and really think deeply. But Meaning I feel this is not typical of Goan society to have the stately houses, right? It seems across the rest of the country, all these palatial mansions and castles and havelis exist, and we are no different in that sense to have these mansions. It's just that our culturally, by accident of history, we got ruled by a colonial power that stayed on for a longer time, and maybe certain things from that power got integrated into our culture here. But I guess that's across the country. It existed. Should we have it or not? I don't know whether there are clear-cut answers to that. A part of me that says we need to preserve history would say yes, we want to have it. But a part of me that looks, completely progressively towards the change that is, coming in, says, why should we, why should this be passed down from generations to generations? Whoever can afford to buy it should have it. That's the way, or whoever gets it should get it. So meaning I can't think of any clear-cut kind of answers to these questions, and these are questions that I think are very pertinent in today's times, in the go off today, basically. If not rest of the country, it's very much relevant for the Goan society of today.
Thank you, Percy, and Alinda as well. So I want to switch directions a little bit and talk about Marie, right? So, or Mari, if you will. So there's a moment in, and Astri already has her hand up, so I'll ask this, I'll comment on this and pass it on to Astri. So there's a kind of like hidden little story in this moment where, so she's hanging out in the attic, she's crocheting, she's doing her work, and then we've got this little mystery, right, where there's a dead laborer at the bottom of the ladder, right? And that story never quite gets resolved, right? In Marie, at one moment, her Preciosa accidentally breaks the cup and saucer, and Marie says, that's how, I think it's João, Savia, is that the...
Yes, it's João.
Yeah. João, she says that's how João fell and splintered, right? And actually the solution to this problem, so when I discussed this in my class with my students, I gave them this riddle. I said, there's a room, it's completely empty, and there's a man hanging from the ceiling, and below him there's a puddle of water. How did the man die? Does anyone know? So I'll repeat that. There's an empty room, there's a man hanging from the ceiling, and below him there's a puddle of water. How did the man die? Because I want you to think about, so she's up in the attic, there's a broken ladder, and then there's João is dead, right? So essentially the question is, how did João die? Astri, I don't know if you were going to respond to that or something else, or your mic's still muted.
I tried to raise my hand for the previous thing, so I don't want to break your thought.
Why don't you comment on that, and then if you want to talk about and just to complete my earlier thing, so the solution to the riddle actually occurs in another one of Savia's books. You've got to read Tales from the Attic, which is where you actually learn about what happens in that moment. But Astri, carry on.
What I wanted to say was when we were talking about houses and identity and maintaining them or not maintaining them, that this is very Goan in one way, and yet to me, I come from a family in Bengal that pre-partition also was had these big houses, and it's not the same context, but it could have been
a story in Bengal, because you have the same, distance between the landowners and people working on the land, and we don't call them Bhatkas and Munkas, but it's the same thing. So I think there's a universality to the story, which it's not just a Goan story. It's a story that could be a story anywhere in India, because we have different. We've had, in Bengal you had the British that were there for not as much as the Portuguese were here, but they certainly influenced the landed people, and so therefore I look at the story as a story which is not just a story about Goa. It is, it has characters that are universal. It has the whole discussion on property is not something that happened then, or it's something that's happening every day in all our families. We have inherited properties, and do we look after them, or do we sell them for development? Some people want, you sell them for whatever reason, you have to sell them, and then someone brings up a monstrosity of a house there, and all of that. That's what's happening in India now. So all of these things are, they are it's a part of the India we live in, and not just Goa. And to me, the story is pretty universal and a question of identity. And when we discuss bringing down idols, not idols, bringing down sculptures, statues, sorry, what do we keep? To me, the process in Delhi started a long time ago. You started changing all the names of the roads, and to me, Connaught Place is Connaught Place. And if you make that into Rajiv Chowk or Indira Gandhi this, or no, it's Connaught Place. Yes, the British were here. It's a part of our history, and we can't just suddenly say no, let's call it something else. They were here. They built Connaught Place. They built these different places, and we live there and we connect with them. So I think we also need to accept the things happen. We don't like some of the things that happen, fine, but they're a part of our history and the part of what we are now, Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, Asri, what you're pointing to is how across South Asia, socioeconomics as dictated by agriculture and the relations that grew out of that are what really, kind of created the feudal system, right? And one of the major challenges for Goan society has been the shift from agriculture to industrialization, which led to the diaspora we have now, where people went elsewhere for work because there wasn't enough work in Goa, so they had to go elsewhere, right? This, we see Marikinia and her family lose power because the system is no longer just agricultural. Income is coming from elsewhere. The economy itself has changed, right? And where one could rely on the labor of Munkars to keep up that lifestyle and a house of that size, the power base isn't there, the labor force isn't there because they've gone elsewhere. They can make far more money and improve in status, not by working for the landlords, but by working in the Gulf or in America, wherever the case might be, right? So that's one of the major changes that we see. And what's remarkable about the novel as a document of cultural history in that sense is it's demonstrating over the course of nearly 100 years, because if we go by the dates that Tish Shamel, who's still alive at the end of the novel, right, it indicates this long span of time and how much changes over the course of time, right? But just very quickly, if we could think about Marie and that moment in the attic and what leads up to it, and then move on from that. So if anyone wanted to comment on Marie and Juin's death. And if there's no interest in that, we can move on to another question.
Actually, Benin, that's from the previous novel, Tales from the Attic.
Right. But it is in, because it also explains to us, it's such a pivotal moment in terms of like why Marie is the way she is, right? So Rujitha, I think you had your hand up.
No, actually, I wanted Savia to speak on this because now I'm very intrigued. So let's not just pass. I don't know what's happening. So, if Savia, if you could please, because I am going to pick up Tales from the Attic, that's for sure. But now I won't be able to sleep. So.
Savia, do you want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Briefly, I'll talk about this, then I'll talk about the writing of the book and why I kind of located it in that space and time. Marie is a young girl and she's sexually exploited by João, who's a house hand, you know, and he's always demanding things from her physically. And what I wanted to show was how a young girl also can take agency of kind of rebuffing her exploiter. So there is this moment that is created where the whole the house is in a flurry of agricultural activity. Some balls have to be taken down from the attic, and the attic is like the space of the mind. So João goes up on the ladder, and the only person who's present in the house is the adopted girl who's supervising all this. He says, he calls her up into the attic, meaning wanting to exploit her. And Marie doesn't like this kind of exploitation. So she goes up and, you know, things are happening and she doesn't like it. Then she remembers that João is going up and down on the ladder, bringing down the same things. At the same time, you know, things are happening to her. So she gauges that there is a little kind of break in the ladder. It's weak at certain points. And with all her force, she kind of pushes down the ladder, which leads to the death of João, because he falls down when he's almost midway up to the ceiling and he has a very bad fall. So what I wanted to show was how a girl can take agency and kind of, you know, break the circle of exploitation. That was the whole thing. And then Marie, in a sense, is very strong in the first novel, but in the second novel, she's just a kind of fossil of the past, who's narrating things, who's at times spouting wisdom because she has had a operation where things were botched up and she ends up losing her memory, you know, and is not able to do the things that she was able to do earlier. So Preciosa in some ways becomes her caretaker. And I wanted her to be like that because I did not want to create strong and powerful characters. A lot of my characters, if you see, they have weaknesses. They're weak. See Robbie, or you see Marie, or you see Preciosa. She's, you know, she's very humble. She's kind of in the background of things, but comes out strongly when it comes to making a statement about the inheritance of the Quinta. Or you see a Tito. Tito is again very weak, prone to tears. He's always lachrymose when, you know, he has to think about the house because it's such a big emotional issue with him. He can never come to terms with his own past, the way his mother treated him. And she constantly says he doesn't have a backbone. He doesn't have a backbone who will create greatness for the house. So therefore, you know, genetically, she kind of dismisses him. She's the first one to throw him out of the house and not allow him to inherit the Quinta. So to him, then to kind of fight the legal battle and get back the house is a kind of vindication of that. Because to him, clearly the house is a mausoleum to the past. He has no other value for it. It's a memory of what he was and what he belonged to that makes him want to have the house. Because immediately when he gets the house, he wants to pass it on to his grandson. But that is foiled by the fact that he realizes very quickly that California, Nana has Suraj, they don't have interests in protecting the house, promoting that memory, but they would like to dispense it. They would like to cash on it, which is what he cannot come to terms to, because for him, the house has a lot of symbolic power, both of heritage and also of what it entails of its presence in the family. So as Benny has rightly pointed out, the house is in some senses, and I think a protagonist. There are no other central characters in the book. There is no main characters in the book, because characters keep coming and going in the 4 parts of the book. They become strong at times and then they get diffused at times. But it is the house that remains strong and is central. I once met a Portuguese journalist, who had written about the Portuguese house in Portugal, and she said how protecting this memory is not an easy decision. It takes years and years of work. You protect it to what end? It consumes you. And I wanted to show how that archaic feudal memory of what symbolic power the house entailed is in some ways consumes all its characters, who want to preserve that hierarchy, who want to preserve that importance that they had that actually came from the house. I once met a lawyer. He said, the house is us. Without the house, what are we? And I think we have to think about what the house means in the Goan psyche. It's sometimes more important than the people themselves, and it's at the same time an entity that is all consuming. It's all the time wanting to eat you up, to consume your energy in its maintenance and promotion. So that was what I that's why I created this whole entity of the Quinta. And I also wanted to show lots of things that were happening in our society. Around 1961, a huge population, maybe 24% of the elites left. And then the power that the society had was actually deployed to another class of people, and how were their reactions to the Quinta? And that you see in the functioning of the panchayat, or the way it goes on, which Robbie belongs. They want to kind of cash on it. At the same time, there are references also to Tish Samuel, who also is a Bhatkar, but he is a benevolent Bhatkar, and that benevolence and that caring for the land, intrinsic relationship to the land is lost. And there is a whole move to want to encash it. You see, encash it or consume its symbolic power. You see that.
It is now. Okay. Okay, so Olinda is asking about some of my deeper insights on the book. I think I've shared most of them. I was going to say something about what Savia just said about the previous. So I think that this is supposed to be a trilogy. So it was going to be Tales from the Attic, Let Me Tell You About Quinta, and then a third book, but we'll have to ask Savia about that, because clearly there's lots of unresolved issues in the story. Olinda, any specific questions? Or anyone else? Or any comments too while we're waiting for Savia? Anything else that you thought we should still discuss? Rahul? And Rahul and then Rajita, please. Go ahead, Rahul.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So, what made this book interesting for me really is, and I asked that question to Savia when I did a small write-up in the newspapers here, in the local newspaper. So the question I asked Savia is that this is, it seems like very, like an auto-fiction, as she calls it, I said, because not only are you sharing the name, I mean, you're saying, I mean, you're Viegas and you're talking about the Viegas family of Carmona, where she lives even now. So there's so much. So I wanted to know really from Savia, how much, what was the challenge of, fictionalizing, let's say, reality. And then Savia answered saying that this is what she calls auto-fictional, autobiographical fiction. And she said that in early books for any author, the authors tend to keep very strongly to reality. And it's only when the author, you know, is into the fourth or fifth book that a camouflage kind of comes in. You know, you can distance yourself from reality. She answered it very well. But well, that's in that article. You know, in fact, I think I shared it on the WhatsApp group. Bennett, did you get to read that article?
I must have missed it. I'll look for it. I'll look for it.
It's there on it's on our WhatsApp group. Yeah, where I've interviewed Bhai Mauzo and Savia for different.
Oh no, I did see that. I did see that. No, thanks. Yeah, no, I did see that.
Yeah,
that's
right. So that's the question I posed to Savia. Really, I found that very fascinating because it's challenging, you know, because it's like, you know, you or me writing about our family or something like that, and you know, then, you know, having the challenge to fictionalize it, you know, some grandmother, some great grandmother or a grand uncle, and you know, you have seen them sometimes as a child, and then you have to, you know, fictionalize it, and how close do you go to reality? You know, it's always a tightrope walk, I think.
But
what do you have to say, Bennett, to this? It'll be interesting to know from you what your take on this is.
I mean, your book club read M in the Big Home, and Jerry probably told you that, you know, the premise of that book was it was meant to be nonfiction at first, but because the subject was so close to him, it was, you know, he's obviously writing about his mother, that it was so close to him that he found that he was unable to write this actual, you know, non-fictional story about his family. So in order to have that kind of space from the real story, he decided to represent it as fiction. And even before I knew that story, reading the novel felt like reading autoethnography, right? But this, I think, you know, the question you're asking, Rahul, and then, you know, this example of Jerry's work, and here where we've got Savia saying, you know, these are the Viegases of Carmona. And if you notice, there's actually a doubling, because Preciosa, when she marries Querositos, she says, I don't have to change my name because I'm Viegas as well, right? So there's a revealing there of a kind of incestuousness. It shows us how power is only within the realm of a few families, right? Okay. But I think we also have to be really cautious about thinking that fiction is reality, right? Any work of fiction is always going to be representation, and any work of non-fiction is also representation. There's never a possibility of actually capturing reality, right? So you know, think of it this way, right? So, you know, we've all watched reality TV, which is one of the mainstays of television these days. We know that the moment you train a camera on somebody, they're no longer themselves. So that even when you are videotaping somebody, right, something changes, something shifts, right? And think of this in our everyday experience of the distance between thinking something and saying it, right? Where what you say never fully captures what you're thinking. It's just impossible, right? So in a sense, reality itself is a kind of fiction. We're always trying to hold on to what is happening in a moment, okay? And so there's in one sense a divide between reality and fiction, but at the same time, fiction is able to capture things that we think of as being unreal because it allows for that distance, right? So the critic Achille Mbembe says, fiction is really important for us to think of really large concepts. So if I say to you, this is the example he gives, right? So he talks about the Rwandan crisis where the Hutus and the Tutsis were killing each other, right? And he says at one point, 1 million African bodies washed up on the shores of various countries because people were being killed indiscriminately, right? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can barely imagine what 100 dead bodies look like, leave alone 1 million, right? But if I read one fictional story about one person rather than an unnamed million people, it gives me a sense of reality, right? It gives me something to hold on to, right? So clearly in this case, by naming the characters Viegas, it's not that Savia is saying this is my family. She's adopting elements from her reality, but at the same time, we should never quite think that it is actually capturing reality. So it might have elements of her family history, but it's also kind of incorporating elements of other families and of other things from Goan history and the Goan past and the present as well. At the same time, we should never expect that fiction should do the work of reality, because why else would we read it, right? It should allow us to think of the various ways that our imagination should develop. And that's the importance of the work of fiction. It allows us to think of reality, reflect on it, but also think of alternative ways of developing our thought processes. Yeah. Savia's back. Savia,
Yeah.
we thought we would wrap up at 8:45, but we wanted to give you, why don't we give you maybe 5 minutes to wrap up what you were saying, and then a remaining 5 minutes for people to ask you any questions they might have.
Yeah.
Savia, one request, just sit back a bit because we can't see your full face. Yeah.
Okay.
Or yeah, I mean, place your...
Or lower the video maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Yeah, okay. So, given the background of, old family houses and the kind of symbolic power that entails, for me in the novel, it was very important to ask who's going to inherit this legacy? How does it pass on? Now that feudalism is kind of given way to a new kind of socio-economic structure, who are the inheritors of this past? Is it the tourist who comes as a consumer, wanting to consume the land, maybe enjoy the symbolic power of the house, and then return after a few years after having lived here, like the two guys who come to buy the house, interested in its past, or is it the real inheritor Suraj, who's abroad, and perhaps never wants to be tied down with this legacy? Because clearly in Suraj's character, you can see that he is kind of wanting to break free from the past, because the past gives him nothing but baggage. It ties him down to the land. It ties him down perhaps to the whole connection with the memory, which he's not comfortable with. He wants to be young, he wants to be free, he wants to be unhindered. You see that in all the choices that he makes. So is he the real inheritor? Or is somebody else the real inheritor? Or is it Robbie, who's actually a non-entity in that society? But at the same time, his gene is that of, as you have rightly pointed out, Bene, he's a composite of all that stands for Goan culture, the high and the low. He is an illegitimate son of a Brahmin. He's, his mother is a washerwoman. He himself is a very interesting character. You see that in the way he handles things on the ship. He is also not in some ways tied to the land, because he has this Russian woman, and then he has an affair with Piedad, and then suddenly he disappears from the scene. But, so therefore Robbie inherits a kind of a composite gene, that of Ramon, that of the sailor, Bamon, and that of, but he has a heart of gold. He cares for the land, he cares for the old values. He wants to preserve it and not exploit it. And I think for me, it was very important to think that inheritor of Goa is not someone high and low. Moving away from that, but it's somebody who really cares for ecology, who has sensitivity towards the land, to be able to protect and promote it in a way that it creates a new kind of sustainability for Goa. So that is how I kind of imagine the entire novel. But at every point of time, in every critical juncture, I had a great time writing it, because for the first time you were able to kind of look at the capsule of Goa and see, how would you think about it? What is your imagination? What is your idea of Goa? And there it is in Let Me Tell You About Quinta. I've really enjoyed this entire session and your observations on the novel, all of you.
Thanks. Any final questions for Savia?
Sorry?
Savia, before you came in, Rahul was asking about the coincidence between your name and those of the characters.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because at some point of time, I played around with a lot of ideas because I wanted to kind of blur the distance between a writer and a book, because I strongly believe that a novel is born of a particular thought process. You know, the writer of the book in some ways infuses it with a life and meaning. So therefore, I made every possible move to kind of create a seamless proximity between me as a writer and the main family in the novel, the Vegases. So at some point of time, you would even think that it is my autobiography, you know, but it is not. It is not in the sense. In fact, I've met people coming from different villages in Goa. Said, "How did you know this happened in our village? How did you know about this particular incident? You know, it happened in another village." So this was very interesting. You also realize that the story of feudalism has a common thread running through all the villages. The stories of exploitation by the upper hierarchies, the exploited segments of society which finally rise against this kind of exploitative structure and find their own ways of subverting it. Like, for example, as you rightly pointed out, and some of you have observed, Piedad is the only one who challenges the power of Marikina. You know, she's all the time confronting her. She's first wanting to emulate her. Like she tells her when she's teaching crochet to her granddaughter, he says, "Why don't you teach me? I would love to." So she's trying to imbibe that symbolic power. One, because of her proximity to Ramon, she wants to inherit that. But when she realizes she cannot do that, she tries to subvert that power and break that bubble of power in which Marikina kind of encapsulates herself. So therefore, even the way Marikina's demise, I left a lot of things to ambiguity. The mattress where she used to hide her money and jewelry, that is all broken. Piedad is missing, and so are the children. And you know, there is Preciosa comes to the house to find that everything is in a stinky disorder. Even the dog has been killed. Who murders it? That's not important, but definitely it is. There are several people that do not like Marikina because of the way she lived through that Bhatkari system. The way she exploited people, like she takes the land away from them forcibly when she knows that there are new laws coming which will give land to the tiller, land to the mundkar. So there, she builds up a lot of animosity, and her demise is very necessary. She cannot, unlike her brother Tishman, he actually becomes an artifact. He becomes a kind of fossilized caricature of that whole system of feudalism. And if you see towards his death, there is a kind of little ceremonious exit after his death, which explains itself the demise of feudalism and the exit of feudalism to create a new social and cultural structure within that society. So I played around with all these characters, these situations, to create certain kind of ways of looking at Goan society. And it was great. It was like playing chess, you know. It took me many years, like many characters had to be written, rewritten. Even the voice had to be rewritten because finally I gave Robbie agency, because the earlier draft of the novel looked like, you know, it was the Bhatkar's voice. And I said, in this century and time, this is not going to work because this is not what I want to kind of prolong anymore. You have to have a new voice coming with new sensibilities. And that would look at the same land, its structures, in a way of enshrining the past, not destroying it, but at the same time, looking at it with a different eye and a different vision.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, before I close, wanted to say that when I teach the novel, I teach it alongside Philomena's Journeys by by Couto. Yeah, so students like sort of, thinking of the fiction of Savia's work alongside the social history from Goa, right? Savia, thanks so much for those insightful comments, and I've enjoyed discussing the book with everyone, and I hope it was a useful discussion for all. I think if there's nothing else, I think we can close. Any announcements or final burning thoughts, questions, ideas?
Thank you very much for suggesting the reading of this book. And I think it's really been an eye-opener for me also, the way all of you have looked at the novel and kind of looked at your own past in the context of the novel. And
Thanks. Yeah, and good luck with the club. It was a pleasure meeting all of you. Sorry it has to be in this interface, but better this than nothing, right? Take care all. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Benny. Benny, thank you very much
session.
for the lovely moderation.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Benny. Yeah. Bye, Savia.
Thanks. Have a nice night. Yeah, bye.